All right. Welcome to the Protect Your Business from Lawsuits interview with personal injury attorney, Zachary Meeks. Thank you for joining. We're getting started a little late today, and we apologize for that. We migrated to Google recently, and so we used to use Zoom, and now we're experiencing some technical difficulties. But hopefully, you're able to get logged in. We had some signups, and it looks like some folks are still waiting to join. We will record this. We are recording this, and so we'll share it out to the list as well for those who maybe weren't able to join us on time. My name is Danielle Laughlin. As you may know, I am the founding attorney here at Sage Business Counsel, and we recently started turning our webinars into a monthly occurrence. This is a new thing for us, and so we appreciate your interest and continuing to show support for this, what we are considering educational opportunity. Our goal, of course, is to always provide value to our community and to make sure that we are doing what we should be doing as good stewards and attorneys in the community to provide information to the public to help them understand their legal rights and responsibilities. They're a double-edged sword. So I am excited to have Zach here with me today. We have been friends for many years, and I have a great deal of respect for Zach. He is a highly ethical attorney, a very pleasant and fun guy to hang out with, and generally just someone that I have great admiration for. And we talked a little bit about this idea a few weeks ago and thought it would be a really interesting spin on this topic, because typically what you see injury attorneys like Zach who talk a lot about injury and how to recover for an injury. And then you see business attorneys like me talking a lot about how to mitigate your risk and how to protect your business from lawsuits. And so we seem to be diametrically opposed, but I think what you'll find interesting today is we actually share some common beliefs and professional experiences that hopefully will be very informative to you and will help you make the right choices in your business as you shop for insurance and as you consider expansion and protecting what you are investing your time, money, and reputation into, which is obviously your company. So Zachary, thank you so much for joining us today. Why don't you just start a little bit by telling us about how you got into personal injury law and what motivates you to do what it is that you do to help injured victims?
Well, Danielle, thank you for the kind words, first of all, and likewise, you're a great friend, and I appreciate you having me on to this webinar today to hopefully give your audience some things to take away from here to better their businesses. We are absolutely aligned on trying to educate those who need to have better practices in their business, and so I am all on board for that. As far as my experience, before becoming a lawyer, I actually worked in corporate America for Progressive Insurance. So I was on the insurance side of things for almost 4 years as a automotive claims adjuster with Progressive Insurance. It was my first job right out of undergrad from Alabama, and got some great experience there learning the insurance side of things. And went to law school in Alabama at Faulkner University in Montgomery from 08 to 11. And then coming out of law school, becoming an attorney, I mean, naturally parlayed into what my experience was on the other side, just this time representing those who I had previously been, kind of had an adversarial relationship with as an adjuster. Now I'm representing the injured person, and it's a pleasure of my life being able to help those who are in need and apply my experience on the insurance side of things to benefit my clients now. And really today, my purpose for being here is to help business owners make good decisions about how they can protect their business from the inevitable claims that will arise when you own a business.
Absolutely. I think it's very powerful to the audience for them to know that you did start, in fact, in the insurance industry. And so you have a unique experience and perspective on this because you have been on both sides and you do understand of course, one of the things we hear a lot about, which is the frivolous lawsuits, right? And that's been a little bit of, I think, some of the talking points that the insurance industry obviously likes to use. But when you've actually worked in loss mitigation, and you've worked in an industry like insurance, I worked for the banks, as you know, before I started working for the businesses, right? So I worked for the creditors before I started working for the debtors, and kind of vice versa with you as well. It's important because it gives you a perspective of balance. And so everything that we've talked about leading up into this talking this webinar today demonstrated to me that you're just the perfect person to have this conversation with. So I'm really excited. Let's get started here.
Hey, can I comment real quick on, you just brought up a
Sure.
good point about, you hear this perception about frivolous lawsuits. And let's talk about that real quick, because me I'm a personal injury attorney, but I'm also a business owner, right? And
Correct.
so we as attorneys do what we call screen cases, which means we evaluate the facts and make sure that they apply to the law on the issue, to make sure they match, to make sure you have a winning case. Because I work off what is called a contingency fee, which means I only get paid if I win. So what interest do attorneys like me, personal injury attorneys who are working off a contingency fee, what interest do we have in bringing a case that has no merit? Because here's the thing, in the law, in the court system, you just can't claim something and then you win. You have to have
Correct.
evidence. You have to have evidence to support your theory as to why you should win. And if you don't have that evidence, you're not going to win. So if I was in the business of bringing frivolous lawsuits, I'd be bankrupt.
Correct.
So I think it's a myth out there that you hear, particularly from the insurance industry, that we as plaintiffs attorneys bring frivolous lawsuits. And that couldn't be anything further from the truth, because if we were bringing frivolous lawsuits, none of us would be in business.
It's true. And I'll say it's not just in the insurance industry, it's in the business community as well. So this is something I hear a lot. I hear it, from clients. I hear it in the chamber conversations that I have out in the business community. And it is definitely a myth. Frivolous lawsuits, they do occur, but they're very rare. Most of the time, the cases with merit that have a clear-cut win settle. And the ones that typically go to trial are the ones where it really is a toss-up, that the facts are so close on each side that each party feels vindicated in pursuing their version of the truth. And so I appreciate that you say that, because I agree with you. And I'm hoping that at the end of this webinar, our audience and those who watch this in the future will also agree with us that frivolous lawsuits are somewhat of a myth. They do exist, of course, but they're very few and far between. And they're usually not brought by licensed attorneys. They're usually brought by pro se litigants who don't actually understand the law. And so there is a prolific filing of frivolous lawsuits, but not as many of them are coming from actual attorneys as people might think. So it's important to definitely highlight that. Let's give them just a little roadmap. So today what we're going to talk about the hidden risks that lurk in your business operations. We're going to help you identify and protect against those liabilities. And then we're going to show you the essential types of business insurance that every company needs or needs to consider, because depending on your operations, you may not need all of the ones we're going to talk about today. You may need some that we don't actually even talk about. Okay, so the insurance industry is very large. There's a lot of different ways that you can insure. So we may not touch on exactly what it is that you need, but what we're going to do by the end of this is provide expert strategies for choosing the insurance coverage for your business based on our conversation with Zach. And after this webinar, we're going to send you an assessment so you can actually assess your operations to see if there's somewhere where you may have a gap. And so I'm excited to send that tool to all of you at the end of the webinar. So quickly, obviously the business insurance is very important, but let's talk a little bit about, what we see, right? So what we know is that risk exists in business. Of course it does. And when there is risk, there will be loss. There's just no question about it. The real issue and the real crux of your strategy as a business owner is to understand the risk assessment, basically. So how likely is this to occur? That's a likelihood of occurrence assessment. And then what would the impact be if in fact it did occur? And that becomes an impact assessment. And when you look at these two things together, that's when you can start to understand where the most risk in your business lies. And oftentimes you're going to need an expert to help you with this. But basically, as we all know, insurance helps to make sure we're prepared when something unforeseen occurs. And when we say unforeseen, that doesn't mean impossible. And I think sometimes it's a slippery slope, because really a lot of the risks that happen in business, they're not unforeseen at all. They're actually foreseeable risks. But we call them unforeseen in the context of the business owner, because a lot of times the business owner doesn't have the requisite experience to know what those risks are until they experience a loss. And so it can sometimes to them feel very unforeseen, but the reality is they're actually very foreseeable and they're predictable. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And of course, lawsuits can drain your cash flow. They can threaten your assets. They can threaten your personal assets as well. So it's very important to pursue a loss mitigation strategy in business, which insurance is part of that. Insurance is a loss mitigation strategy. And so we consider that to be part of responsible business ownership. I'm going to let Zach take this one, talking about business insurance myths. Zach, what do you mean when you say full coverage doesn't exist? I think this is fascinating, and I'd love for you to explain what you mean by that.
Well, so in my world, I'm usually I'm dealing with people, individuals. I do not represent businesses. So, but it's the same concept, because when you're buying insurance, you're buying coverage for losses. And so what I hear commonly in my world is that, oh, I have full coverage. And that is such an ambiguous term. What does full mean, right? And so people who buy insurance feel this false sense of security of, oh no, I have all the insurance I need, when in fact that could be nothing. It could be further from the truth in many, many instances. So anytime I hear someone say that, I'm like, oh no, we're gonna have to kind of go back and let's take that term, which is really, I think, more of a marketing term. Honestly, it's not a legal term of art when it comes to insurance coverage. There's no such thing as I'm buying the full coverage. You don't buy that. You're buying different types of insurance products within one policy. So the full coverage concept is more of a marketing concept on the insurance side of things. When an agent's selling a policy, they may use that term, you're getting full coverage, as a way to, for their potential customer, ease their mind. But in reality, that is not an actual coverage you're buying, full coverage. So I think there's a disconnect between those that are selling it and those that are purchasing it as to what that means, what that means. And so it's really, that's why it's important to be educated on what you're buying. Okay. Because that full coverage is telling me you think you have something, but you don't know you have it. Right.
Correct.
And so it's a way to, it's almost a way to make yourself feel better. Like, I do have it. I think I have it. That's why I'm saying I have full coverage. But when we delve into the weeds, which is in a deck page, a declarations page, that will actually tell you specifically what coverages you have bought and for what price.
Great point. Great point. And the irony is that I actually did an interview yesterday with the Insurance Lawyer podcast. And so I guess right now insurance is just all we're talking about here at Sage Business Council. But one of the things we were talking about is how the broker often will complete applications, or they will choose the coverage based on very minimal input from the consumer or the business owner. And so a lot of times it is a false sense of security, like you said, because the policy purchaser in this situation for us, of course, the business hasn't actually looked at the documents and doesn't actually know what that coverage is or what risk it actually would cover in the event of a claim. So I really appreciate how you brought up this full coverage idea, because honestly, I've never thought of it that way. And I think you're right. I think that a full coverage, it's like it's like what we see in the grocery store now. Everything's healthy, everything is organic, and it's like, what does that really mean? It doesn't have any legal significance, and that's important when we're talking about
too, though, Danielle. I do think it's imperative that people, when they buy insurance, that they buy it through an agent. And so in Georgia, you do have the option to buy coverage online
on your own. Yes,
on your own, but that is a poor decision on many fronts. And the main reason why is because the agent that you end up buying from isn't charging you any extra to buy it from them versus buy it online. You're just getting hopefully, if you're going to the right agent, you're getting educated on what you're buying, so you have an understanding as to A, what you need, and B, what you end up buying. And there's an education role there that the agent should be playing while purchasing the insurance. So while I say that some people may use that as a way to market or kind of get over that hurdle, giving them a false sense of security by saying you have full coverage, if the agent's a good agent, they're going to have thoroughly gone through your coverages with you, so you understand exactly what you're buying, and you're not going to get that when you buy online. And so I will say I see more problems with this concept of full coverage when people are buying their insurance online than I do with an agent, because they don't know what they're buying online. They see the cheapest thing and they think that there's no difference in the coverages, right? I'm looking at the price. They're all the same. I'm going to buy the cheapest one. Well, that is a terrible way to go about purchasing insurance, especially for a business.
Absolutely. And I agree. That's a great point, because most of our clients have an agent of some kind, or they get a referral from us and we give them an agent that they can talk to, and usually a few options for them to find the right one. But you're right. I think a lot of times folks, especially if they're just starting their business, they probably are doing exactly that. And just like a consumer mindset, right? What is the cheapest? And I see this a lot with the business owners in the very beginning. It's all about the cheap, cheap, cheap. And, and that's fine, because you've got a budget that you need to honor, of course. But ultimately, when we're talking about risk mitigation, that's not what you don't want to skimp on those things, right? Those are the things that are going to keep you in business, because it is risky out there. And so you want to use proactive strategies to mitigate loss with insurance. So Zach, tell us, what are the most common ways that you see companies exposed to injury lawsuits in particular?
Well, it goes back to that procurement of insurance. It's the failure to procure the correct coverage, or you have procured the correct coverage and you have inadequate limits. So insurance is only going to protect you to the extent of the coverage you purchased, right? Anything in excess of that is going to be, you're on the hook as a business owner. Okay. So I'm going to give you an example in my career. And you may find this wild, but I represented a mother and a child the child was at a daycare and was injured at a daycare. And it wasn't a catastrophic injury or anything. It was, frankly, not a terribly serious injury. But I represented this mother and child because I wanted to help. And I felt I was, it was a daycare. So I'm like, certainly there's insurance here, right? It's a daycare. Did you know in Georgia that daycares are not required to carry liability coverage?
Wow, no, I did not know that.
Yeah, and I didn't know either until I got into the weeds of the case and ended up suing this daycare, and they didn't have insurance. So what happened?
Wow.
They basically did the whole ostrich concept. They buried their head in the sand and ignored what was going on. So I ended up getting what is called a default judgment, which means I filed the lawsuit and the other side never responds. Or they did respond, actually, but they responded. It was the owner of the business who responded on behalf of the business pro se. Well,
Can't
the
do
problem
it.
with that, you can't do that because that's unauthorized practice of law because you're representing a
Correct.
business entity which is separate and distinct from you.
Thank you, Zach. Preach it, please preach it.
So we had the answer struck for, it was not a valid answer. They never hired an attorney to answer. And so we ended up getting a default judgment. So we went on the issue of liability automatically. And then we go to have a damages hearing before the judge. And I get there and there's no one there on behalf of the defendant. So what happens? I ask for a sum of money well in excess of probably the value of the case, and the judge grants it because there's no contest.
Correct.
So what happens next? I get this big judgment. I proceed with a garnishment proceeding, and so we garnish every dime out of the business bank account. Every single last dime is now going to my law office for the benefit of my client, and they're left with nothing in their bank account. And I'm pretty certain, I'm not 100%, but I'm pretty certain that put them out of business.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. And, one of the things that we see a lot is, like you mentioned, the ostrich concept, which is, I'm so busy. I don't know that it's always hyper intentional. I mean, obviously there's an intentionality of not going to hire the attorney to get the help that you need. But sometimes people, I think, they put themselves in this victimized mindset where they feel like they don't have the money, or this isn't that serious, or this is just, it's going to go away. It's not a big deal. And they can skirt on their responsibilities and end up in this situation, as you're mentioning. And I think it's important that, members of the audience understand when an attorney like Zach shows up, make a claim, like he said from the beginning, he has to prove that case. And so if there is a defense to be made, you have to make it in a timely manner in order to be able to prevent a judgment that may not really be a fair judgment. But if you don't show up to defend yourself, the law is not going to protect you. And a lot of times people have been brought up with this idea of the defense, criminal defense. You get an appointed attorney if you can't afford one. And they don't recognize that, look, you're not going to get an appointed attorney in a civil matter like this. The government's not trying to put you in jail. So there's no lawyer that's going to pro bono help your business stay out of bankruptcy. And then number two, like you mentioned, the owner cannot represent the business because they're separate entities. And this is a big thing that we try to educate our clients on. A lot of times, especially if it's a single owner or family ownership, there is a mindset of the business is us and we are the business. We're all the same here. And they want the protection of liability shields like LLCs or corporations, but they don't want the responsibility of obtaining insurance, being a good steward of their assets, hiring the appropriate advisors like lawyers, CPAs, brokers. In order to get that protection, you have to actually exercise the responsibility to get it. It's not automatic. And so sometimes you can even pierce the corporate veil. Do you want to talk a little bit about piercing the corporate veil and what that means to you as an injury attorney?
Well, thankfully, I haven't had to do that very often in my careers. The majority of my cases do have some type of insurance, which I'm thankful for. But the concept is if you co-mingle your business and personal affairs, where basically you are the business entity is nothing more than just kind of a front, then we can come after your personal assets. And that does happen on occasion. And is that preferable for someone like me who is a personal injury attorney? No, I mean, that's so complex, right? There's so many layers of trying to get to that. And also, that's the reason you set up a business entity. You have to have a legitimate business interest, right? It has to be something going on there. And but it's so simple to prevent that from happening by just simply
Correct.
buying the insurance necessary to protect your business and to provide some type of indemnity for those that may have a claim, a legitimate claim against your business. And let's go back real quick to like some, industries about, for instance, this daycare I just talked about. On top of just protecting yourself, I mean, you're in the business of protecting children and you don't
Right.
have insurance. Like that doesn't jive. Like your job is to protect children, but then, mistakes happen, things happen, but you don't have the insurance there in the event something happens. That's not being a good corporate citizen, in my view.
Correct. I would even say it's unethical, frankly.
Totally. I mean, totally agree. And so, businesses do have duty, in my view, they have duties to the community, right? And if you're taking care of other people's children, part of your role not only is to care for them, their physical needs while they're in your care, but also if something happens, that there's some recourse for them to be able to be made whole, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a great point too, because being a good corporate citizen, let's just dive into that idea for a second. Many of our clients are shocked when they learn that a corporation or an LLC is viewed as a person under law. And this concept can kind of shock people. If they haven't heard it before, it's almost like, well, what do you mean? How can a corporation or an LLC be considered a person? Well, it's considered a person because it has rights and responsibilities. And it takes from the community, and it also imposes harm or externalities on the community the same way that a person does. So when a person is born into this world, we know that they're going to consume the roadways at some point. They're going to maybe go to the local schools. They're going to use the water system, the lights, etc. Right? All of those civic provisions that our governments provide to us here in the United States. So that human is going to eventually have to begin to pay taxes. And why are they going to pay taxes? To cover the cost of what is their externalities, the imposition and use of the communal assets. A corporation or an LLC is no different. When a company is formed and it begins to go into the marketplace, it starts to consume resources. It has an impact. It's hiring people in the community. If it goes out of business and those people lose their jobs, that has an impact on the community. Can that household still maintain their rent or their mortgage? Can they still maintain the cost of care for their children? All of those things are impacting the community. So you are a citizen. When you're a business owner, you're a human, personal citizen as an individual, but you also have a citizenship as a company owner because you represent that company. And it's important to be a good steward and to protect the people that you're impacting, particularly your customers, your employees. Those are the two main groups of stakeholders that are most impacted by lack of insurance. Although it could also be third parties, right? We talk about fleet vehicles on the roadway as the most obvious example of this. If a plumber is on the way to a job and gets into a car accident and it's his fault, we would, of course, expect for that plumber's company to pay for the cost of that car accident. But then when we get to the business, we don't think about, well, what happens when they're on my private property? When I'm out here on the roadway, I'm on public property. That's why there's minimum insurance requirements. In my business, it's private property. And therefore, there's no other bank for an injured party to collect from. That's why if you don't have the right insurance, you could potentially go bankrupt. The $90,000 figure that we have in this slide, this is actually an old figure that we got. I want to say even before 2018. It was definitely before the pandemic. That's the average cost of a breach of contract lawsuit. Negligence lawsuits can go even higher than that because we have expert witnesses, and all kinds of things like that. So if you don't have the appropriate insurance, it's not just the risk of the loss, it's also the risk of the cost of the lawsuit, because you're going to have to pay your lawyer out of pocket. And that's going to impact a lot of things, your ability to pay the injured party, your operations. So it's really critical to think about this. So Zach, let's talk a little bit about the different types of commercial insurance. Obviously, we don't have enough time to go into each of these, deep diving. Not that either one of us would really be the best person to do that anyway. But do you want to touch on just kind of generally what these different types of commercial policies do, and if you have any anecdotes about how any of these policies have come up in your experience with business owners? We'd love to hear that as well, and how you may have seen it help the business owner prevent big, economic loss.
Sure. So I deal with some of these more than others. Starting with number one, their commercial general liability business owner policy. I mean, that's kind of the staple of your protecting yourself with insurance, your portfolio, is having that business owner policy, that commercial general liability policy that's going to cover, anything that happens on the premises. So say if you're a store and you invite customers into your store to buy goods from you, it's going to cover any claim from any third party that may walk into your store and say that they've been harmed in some way, particularly like in my context, a personal injury type situation. That policy would kick in and both defend you, which, like you just talked about, the cost of hiring an attorney to defend you, the experts necessary, all the case cost expenses necessary to put up a viable defense. It's going to pay for those expenses, which could be enormous in certain types of cases. So, and you're paying, my clients get access to justice and the benefit of me working off a contingency fee, which means they don't have to come out of their pocket. They just bring a viable case to me and I'll say, I will represent you. I get paid a percentage of the gross recovery I'm able to obtain on your behalf, and we're off and running. Okay. For the business owner, it is not that simple, because especially if you don't have insurance, you're going to have to be paying your attorney by the hour. And defense attorneys are not cheap.
We're not.
They're not cheap. And so you can rack up a very large defense bill very quickly. And once you stop paying them by the hour, they're going to withdraw from your case.
That is the truth, Zach. That is absolutely true.
So just so structurally, there's an inherent advantage for my client, the plaintiff, at the outset, because they don't have to come out of pocket to hire counsel, while your business clients, Danielle, do. And so that's where commercial general liability insurance is so important. And that is the staple of any risk mitigation strategy. If you don't have that, you are asking to go out of business. Especially if you're inviting your customers onto your property.
Onto your property. I was gonna bring that up. So, some business owners are doing work from home. They're actually like home-based businesses. They may be freelancers, or just their work doesn't require, in-person consumer activity. But even if you have a place where you don't see folks often, or if you are a home-based business and let's say sometimes you have suppliers or customers show up for random situations, you can, with your home policy, provided that you can actually have this business lawfully in your HOA community or your county where you have a valid business license, okay, you're not in contractual breach, you can insure your home-based business as well through your homeowner's policy. And so if you're a home-based business, you want to talk about that too, because you may not be able to get a commercial general liability policy, but you can typically add a rider onto your home policy. And then workers' comp too is another big area, especially we see this a lot because we do a lot of construction. And so a lot of our clients end up with workers' comp claims, but they also end up with workers' comp coverage issues where they thought they had coverage and they didn't, or they thought their sub had coverage, but their sub didn't have adequate coverage. They can get into issues with their insurers about earned premiums on comp that they didn't actually pay because they didn't identify some of the folks that they were supposed to identify. And so it kind of works on both ways with some of these things, because especially with comp that's statutorily required in many cases, regulations will impose certain requirements. Number 4, professional liability or E&O is one that can be a regulatory requirement. Sometimes you have commercial liability, like general contractors have to have a certain amount of liability coverage. And I think the minimum is $1 million. And that's certainly what we recommend. We always recommend to our clients a minimum of $1 million general liability coverage for on-premises issues. And then depending on the scale of their operations, it can obviously go up from that, or the risk, maybe, some of the manufacturers and things where their premises are inherently risky, of course, would need higher general liability. Anything else you want to add here just to highlight some of the ones? I think number 9 is interesting too. And I know you probably don't do a lot of product liability. I don't defend product liability or cyber liability either, but those are 2 particular areas which are very critical. I definitely have had clients in the past who were product companies, and they needed to have adequate product coverage, but they didn't. They thought that was covered under their general liability, and it's not.
No. Yeah. So, I mean, as far as these, I'm not a workers' compensation attorney. So I'm not going to get too much in the weeds on that. But one thing your business owners need to understand is your employees, while on the clock, if they're injured, there's no requirement for them to show that you were, as the business owner, were at fault for their injury. It's simply they're on the clock and they're injured. They're entitled to compensation under the workers' compensation statute. Period. End of story. There's it's a no fault coverage. And so think about the risk there. If you're not carrying workers' compensation coverage, and I know the law says 3 or more employees, if you have 1 employee, you need to have workers' compensation coverage, because of all the claims, the lowest threshold, the lowest burden of being able to bring a claim that I can think of is workers' comp. It's simply they're injured while they're working, period. And you're on the hook. And if you don't have the coverage, you're going to be on the hook for whatever they're entitled to under the statute. And
great point.
Arguments of why it happened or who caused it are not relevant.
They're not relevant. And another thing that does come up here is sometimes I'll hear, well, I think he was high on the job.
Doesn't matter.
I'm like, well, if you didn't have a drug policy, if you weren't testing, if you didn't test at the time, you don't have any defense to this. And like you said, if they're injured while they're on premises and you've had none of these things in place and you don't have coverage for them, you are SOL. I mean, there is really nothing for you, because the workers' comp board will slap sanctions on you as well. You'll be sanctioned for not having proper insurance. And that's another whammy. So you pay the lawyer, you pay the claim for the high employee that you don't think should be getting coverage, and you have to pay sanctions to the board for not having coverage.
That's a quick way to lose your business, not having workers' compensation.
Really, it is.
And I don't care. I'm a law firm, right? I have workers' compensation coverage. My employees are sitting in their desk all day. Okay?
But
the reality is, as soon as I ask them to go get in their car and go to the, go to the post office for me or whatever task I need done.
Correct.
You're injured,
Or just
that's the workers' comp thing.
even injury for desk workers. You can get carpal tunnel.
Yeah.
You have to get physical therapy because if you don't have ergonomic seating, you could trip over a wire or a rug accidentally. I mean, many things could occur. And absolutely, I mean, a lot of times, we talk about risk and people always laugh at lawyers. Well, they don't laugh at lawyers. They hate lawyers for this, I think. But it's always, well, why are you always looking at the worst case scenario? Well, we are looking at the worst case scenario because if that worst case scenario occurs, you lose all the things that you've been working so hard for. So ultimately, it's not looking at the worst case scenario because you want to be a doomsdayer. It's looking at the worst case scenario so you can help your clients. And I think a lot of times the business attorneys, we have a tough time because we try to have these conversations and nobody wants to hear it because their friend, Joe, his employee had an injury and it turns out that he didn't have to pay that claim because of X, Y, and Z. And so that one unique circumstance has now justified them in their mind that they don't need something. And I see this a lot. It's like, well, that happened to my friend and they were okay. And it's like, well, the dice that they were rolling apparently were hot dice, right? But if yours are cold, like you're done for. Okay.
Yep.
So it's almost like, you're gonna go to Vegas and you're gonna play the same cards that your friend played when he won the jackpot, right? You're gonna get the same deck. So it is a little bit short-sighted, but I do think that it's very prevalent, honestly. I mean, I hear it a fair amount.
Then another one on here that's, kind of in your world, Danielle, the employment practices liability coverage. I mean,
yeah.
Businesses have disgruntled employees all the time. And if they decide they want to make some claim, whether it be a discrimination claim, and it goes all the way from hiring practices all the way through, termination of an employee, that all the different phases of employing somebody, it can also come from your own manual that you don't have Danielle draft for you, that you find on online somewhere. That's some generic employee manual that you decide you want your employees to abide by. And then when you get into a situation, you as the business owner decide not to follow your own manual, that is a right claim for an employment action. And so
absolutely
liability coverage so your commercial general liability is not going to cover that. You have to have that specific coverage to cover you in the event that you get a either someone who's been applying for a position with your company or an employee that decides they want to sue you because you didn't do something correctly. And
that's right.
That can also add up big time defending an action like that. So
it certainly can. And we see it too as retaliation.
It's a very underutilized coverage that a lot of people don't even know about.
That's true. They don't know about it. And they also don't understand, as you just mentioned, and this is one of the things we try to educate them with as well, is, listen, when you decide to hire an employee, you don't need to look at, can I afford to pay them their salary, their wages, and taxes. You need to also consider, can I afford to pay them any benefits? Can I afford to pay for the extra insurance that I'm going to need to insure them? Am I ready to take on the responsibility of adding all of these different safeguards? Because a lot of times I hear the employers say, well, I'm providing all of this opportunity for my employees. And I'm like, well, if you haven't checked the job market recently, there's a lot of opportunity out there for employees.
And you providing opportunity is not a defense to anything.
It's not. And, and might we also add, in exchange for the money you pay them, they actually give you labor, right? So, I mean, are you really providing this opportunity, or are you simply saying, I have cash to pay for the value of your services, and that person needs the cash more than they need the time that they have to give those services? It's literally a contractual value exchange, just like any other. But a lot of times employers feel so entitled because they feel like they are the ones who have brought this great job to this employee. And it's
You're
like,
not doing
you
anyone a
know,
favor.
you're not. And, and certainly the employee doesn't view it that way. I mean, come on, we've all been employees before, even before you became a boss. I don't know many people that just sort of happenstance into being an owner or a manager without ever having to be an actual employee. So, amnesia about what it means to work for someone. I never thought that I was showing up out of the kindness of my employer's heart to get my paycheck, right? I mean, it's
Correct.
just
No, you earn
not.
every minute you're at the office, you're earning that paycheck. So
That's
you're not
correct.
doing, your employer's not doing you a favor. They're paying for your time and expertise.
Correct.
And that's
And
the
expertise.
exchange. So the mindset of the employer thinking that, you're doing this some altruistic thing for your employees, so they shouldn't sue you. Well, that's just bunk. I mean,
It's immature. It's immature, right? It's just immature. It's not the right approach. It's not the right mindset to have. And if those mindsets are lurking, okay, if you're watching this and you're thinking, oh my gosh, they're really, coming at me. Okay. If you're feeling like you're being personally attacked right now, it's judgment-free zone, guys. The reason we're doing this is because we want you to understand, like, what are the conversations that lawyers like Zach and I have when the clients aren't around and the judges and the juries aren't around? What are we talking about? Well, we have a common interest. We want the business to survive. We want the injured party to get compensated because it's not their fault, assuming it's not their fault, okay, of course, that they were injured. So if it's not their fault that they were injured, they should not bear the cost of that injury. And I think that that's pretty universally acceptable. So hopefully, if you're feeling any kind of triggers here, or you feel like, oh man, this is kind of a Debbie Downer, let's get into, how do we get out of this situation? What do we want to start looking at to figure out what our next steps might be? So we can start to change a mindset maybe that's going to keep us stuck or at risk. So Zach, what's the most prevalent myth that you hear about workplace risk and injuries? We've talked a little bit about some of them, but anything that stands out to you that you've heard in the past?
well, we've already touched on one of them, and it's really kind of almost outside of what I do on a regular basis, and in the workers' compensation world. Is that the biggest misconception is that if the employee causes their injury on the clock, then you as the business aren't responsible. And I don't even do workers' comp. I refer all that business out, but I do take a lot of intakes as personal injury and workers' comp kind of, intertwine in a lot of ways. So I do hear a lot of workers' comp cases that I immediately refer to an expert. And but it's the notion that you as the business owner don't owe if the employee did something stupid on the clock and injured themselves.
Yes. That is a big myth.
And then the other one is kind of the inverse of that. If my employee injures someone else on the clock, then they're responsible and me as the business owner aren't. And that is false. You as the business owner are responsible for the wrongful conduct of your employees while they are on the clock. It's what they call—
And your contractors, unless you have contractual indemnification.
And for whatever reason, they feel like, oh, well, but my employee caused it, or that's their problem. No. We have in Georgia, and I think pretty much in every state, I'm not aware of a state that doesn't have this, but it's respondeat superior. You are responsible for the conduct of your employees. You are on the hook for it. And so not just that myth that, that's their problem. There are exceptions, like if it's so outside the scope of what they're supposed to be doing for your business and they injure someone, sure, there may be a defense there for something called a frolic or just totally out, criminal conduct or something like that. But if it's within the scope of their employment with you and they injure someone, you are on the hook as the employer.
Absolutely. And that's very critical, especially for professional liability. I'll say, like, we have a case where we're actually suing an insurance brokerage, and the defense strategy has been, well, the agent who wrote that policy was an independent contractor. And I'm like, but you have no independent contractor agreement with an indemnification clause that says that they're going to indemnify you for this. So they are your agent and you are responsible for their actions. A lot of times we'll hear this, well, independent contractor. It's like the catch-all of it ain't my fault. It ain't my fault. What was that song? Oh, it ain't my fault. Remember that song? And I was
think
thinking
I've
about
heard
that
of
song. It's like something I remember. It ain't my fault. It ain't my fault. It's a song from back in the 90s, but whenever I hear people talk about, 1099 contractor, it literally, I think it was I know what it was. It was like a Shaggy. I think it was Shaggy song. Anyway, anybody
No,
who
I think
knows
you're
that
right,
song.
though. People trying to term actually their employee as an independent contractor gives them a false sense of security that I don't have to pay for these taxes. I'm not responsible for what they're doing.
What they're doing. Yeah, exactly. And
it's a
yeah, it
total.
wasn't me.
Just because you
That's what it
classify
was. It wasn't
someone as
me.
something doesn't mean that's the actual facts of what's going on there.
Correct.
And
Correct.
so, like, agency, if they appear to the public to be part of your business and you've done nothing to create a division
they got your email address.
Yes.
They got a company card. They're on your website. I mean,
no.
Yeah.
You're under your control while at work. You're dictating what they're doing. So it's going to be a factual analysis. How you classify them is really not relevant. It's the factual analysis of what they're actually doing. Are they working essentially as an employee, or are they not? Are they totally independent from you? And a lot of times we know, you see this probably all the time, Danielle. They're classified as 1099, but they're not 1099
They're
employees.
not. Yep. And, we try to, again, our whole goal here at Sage is to educate. We want our clients to be empowered. And this is a big myth. We see this a lot, and it has major implications with insurance, because an insurer is not going to cover a risk if the risk is not a known contracted risk. And an independent contractor isn't going to have proper insurance if there's no contractual requirement for them to have it. So oftentimes people will say, well, they're independent contractor. Do you have a written agreement? Do you have indemnification clauses? Is there insurance to cover their risk? If not, guess what? Sorry, not sorry. You're going to have to litigate that through the court system. And guess what? It might take you 18 months or longer to resolve that case. And you have to pay your lawyer because there's no insurance coverage for it.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you're right about things, that's another thing. This is not about being right or wrong. Even if you're ultimately right about this, how much has it cost you to be right? That is something that so many owners fail to understand. The cost of being right can put you out of business.
And really, this is coming from a business owner's perspective, not necessarily a personal injury perspective. But as a business owner, your goal should be to try to ethically maximize profit, and then shift as much risk away from you as possible. That's the goal. If you have a ton of risk with your business, it's a ticking time bomb. Something's going to happen. And that's why there's insurance products out there to take as much risk as a risk analysis from someone like you, Danielle, is so important, because you need to first know what your risks are before you can insure them, right?
Correct.
And so,
yes.
So that's why having a business attorney like Danielle is so important, is to be able to assess your risk and then find ways to get rid of it, or have someone else take it for you. You give them money and they'll say, okay, we'll assume the risk for you now. As a business owner,
absolutely. And I appreciate that endorsement for some of what we do here at Sage, Zach, because one of the issues I think that really is very prevalent, we don't get a call until there's a problem. And you don't want to call your lawyer when there's a problem. You
Nope.
want to have a relationship with your lawyer before the problem arises. Hopefully you can mitigate the problem with the insurance and the contracts and all of these agreements. And so a lot of times it's like they come because they have a big problem. We try to help them with the problem. Maybe they don't have insurance coverage, right? We defend employment claims. We defend workers' comp, uninsured workers' comp claims. We defend for employers and businesses that don't have proper insurance. Our rates aren't that cheap, guys. You know, we're charging $500 an hour for attorney time. We're charging $250 an hour for paralegal time. It's not cheap. But when you come and you didn't do the things on the front end that you were supposed to do, you can expect you're going to pay a premium on the back end. So we try to help them with these kind of flat fee arrangements and general counsel arrangements so they can start mitigating costs. And it's very important that they hear from people other than just us about how critical that can be for their business. Because Zach, you have taken your time today, and I just want to say thank you here because you've taken your time today to talk to us about these really critical issues. And most of our audience is not going to be brushing down your door because they have a personal injury claim, right? But you decided as a business owner and as a steward of just law, right? Just somebody who cares deeply about the subject matter to offer your time today. And I want to say thank you because this perspective is very critical, I think, for business owners to hear. So let's move ahead here. We've got the mindset shifts. I think we've really talked a lot about this. Obviously, you want to reframe your perspective, right? Make sure that you're looking at insurance as an investment as opposed to a cost. And don't be in scarcity mindset, right? If you're thinking, I can't afford it, well, that's going to breed more risk, okay? You want to ask yourself, how can I afford it? How do I prioritize this? And then finally, you want to rely on the experts, okay? People like Zach and me and the insurance brokers, we can't all be wrong here, okay? The insurance commissioners, the lawmakers, the judges, they can't all be wrong about this stuff. And so sometimes it's just accepting that there are facets of your business that you're not going to be an expert in, and you need some additional support for that. These are the primary risk types, and we kind of provided this more just for kind of general knowledge. Zach, do you want to say anything specifically about any of this? We've tried to give them an idea about when we talked about at the beginning, the risk assessment, right? The likelihood of it happening versus the impact of it happening to kind of help them see where different things might appear not to be as big of a risk, but maybe what the big risk is that even though it's not likely to happen, when it does happen, it has a huge impact on your company. Do you have any thoughts about these ideas?
These buckets are great, and I want to kind of focus in on the commercial auto at this time. So if your business entails your employees driving around a lot, this is the most critical. This is the easiest way to end up with a massive claim against you is a commercial auto claim. As we all know, vehicles are very dangerous, right? And you get on the most dangerous thing you do every day typically is driving around. Period. That is the most dangerous, most dangerous thing most people do every day is get in their car and go from point A to point B because of the risk of having a very serious car wreck. And a lot of times you can't prevent it. Most times when you're not at fault, there's nothing you could have done to prevent the accident in most instances. So it's like the analogy you've already given, Danielle, is that rolling of the dice every day. You get in your car. You know, you get one day you're going to have a snake eyes and it's not going to be a good day. And without commercial auto coverage, your business is really at risk of having a massive loss on its hands.
And it's not just like a fleet too. You gave the example earlier, like you send somebody out to go get lunch, right?
Yeah,
or you send somebody to Office Depot, right? Or they're pulling into the parking lot of your business and they get into an accident. Literally. It's like you're in the course of employment, you're on the premises of employment. This is a covered claim. It's either going to be a comp or it's going to be a commercial auto, or maybe some facets of both. Sometimes you can see a little bit of both. So what exactly is it that makes people think that driving out there without this coverage is something that they don't need to be worried about? Don't I don't know, but I will say this: if any of you are in a landlord, a commercial landlord lease, your landlord more likely than not has insurance requirements in your lease, and one of them is likely to be commercial auto. So if you have a commercial lease, take a look at that lease and make sure that if there's insurance requirements, you have them, because if your employee hits somebody else in that parking lot and you don't have that coverage, your landlord can call breach if there's any issue about getting the claim paid. So, it's a little stuff like that folks aren't really thinking about. And a lot of times, if you're not in a high risk company where you have a fleet, your commercial auto costs are going to be very nominal. And so you just want to make sure that you do have that coverage, even if it is, again, just a very ministerial thing. It's not even part of their core job function to be driving around.
And let me say this, Danielle, because the commercial, the likelihood of loss in a commercial auto setting is both, it's likely, and then it's also, it has more potential than maybe others to be significant in nature as far as the amount of the loss. It's critical that you buy more than the state minimums as far as a commercial auto policy. I mean, it's one thing for an individual who comes out of college, doesn't have any money, doesn't have any assets, and they buy a minimum limits $25,000 personal auto policy. That's probably appropriate for them because they don't have anything, right? Mm-hmm. But a business to have minimum limits, so they have coverage, but they only have minimum limits of coverage. That's, again, kind of that false sense of security, because attorneys like me are going to be, we know businesses generally have assets well above the insurance available. And if we're not providing enough coverage, we'll just simply say, we're not going to accept that amount. We're going to take this all the way to trial and get a judgment, and we'll collect that on top of the excess that we're going to get from you.
Thank you. That's actually something I don't think people are aware of. Just because your insurance coverage caps at a certain amount does not mean that that's all the injured party can recover.
Correct. Especially it is much more likely that you're going to have an attorney like me be interested in pursuing a claim over and above insurance coverage in the commercial setting than maybe the personal setting, because of the fact that most businesses have assets we could recover from. So,
or if you're a high net worth individual, I mean, a lot of our owners are, in the upper echelons of income. You're earning more income than 95% of the population. It's not a secret. This information is available, and we have access to investigators and all kinds of stuff. I think that's the other part. We can, as lawyers, we have the ability to subpoena records and things of that nature. And I think that sometimes people feel this false sense of security, like they've got all their stuff hidden away or nobody knows about it, or, something like that. And it's like,
false sense of security.
False sense of security. That's not the case. So that's actually a good point.
In addition, with your liability, your liability limits as a business need to be, in my view, you need to have at least $500,000 in liability coverage. I think that's the minimum. Ideally, you should have some type of umbrella coverage, so that you don't have. Listen, you go get a massive judgment against you, they can be garnishing your business's revenue until they get paid. Then you're working for someone else, and then you're working just to pay off your business functions to pay off the judgment, right?
Correct.
I think 500 at a minimum, really ideally $1 million, is, in my view, responsible business ownership. And then on top of that, you should be purchasing what is called uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage, which means
Yeah, you
if
will.
you have someone in your business organization that's driving in a company vehicle or on your behalf, and they're in an accident where they aren't at fault. They didn't cause the accident. They were injured by someone else, and someone else's policy doesn't have enough coverage. You're providing coverage for your employee to be able to get
Correct.
compensated and made whole. And that just goes back to, and that's also such cheap coverage. It's not expensive at all. And so having uninsured motorist coverage, in my view, 85 to 90% of people driving around out there, in my experience, don't have enough insurance. They don't. So the likelihood you're going to need uninsured motorist coverage is really high. Because it not only covers uninsured people, it covers underinsured people. And so,
the person that's out there with that state minimum,
yes,
right? They've got the $25,000 policy, and your company vehicle might be $100,000 plus vehicle, and its damages might be
absolutely.
$15,000 or $20,000, plus the impact on medical and things like that for your employee and their time out of the office and all of that. So yeah, I mean, it's really important. I want to just touch on just really quickly too, when you're thinking about high likelihood and then the low or moderate financial impact, like Zach brought up here, some of these can be significant. For example, a slip and fall might be minor. It might just be somebody broke their ankle. Okay. It's not minor for their impact on their lifestyle, let's be honest. But in terms of a medical impact, it may be minor. But they may also slip and fall and get a concussion and have brain trauma. For a commercial auto, it could be a fender bender. It could be a life or death situation. And the same idea with compensation. All of these are things that are definitely likely to happen. And thinking that, oh, well, it wouldn't be a big deal or whatever, that's really a false sense of security. And when you're looking at the financial and the strategic here, what I'd like to just comment on here is that the financial impact here, these typically have reputational impact as well, because they're going to, like E&O is going to professional services, errors and omissions. Cyber liability is going to data protection. EPLI, the employment practices liability, is going to how you show up as an employer and how you conduct your business as an employer. All three of those have significant reputational impact. So if you don't have insurance coverage to mitigate the cost of the actual claims, and you're trying to fight the cost of the claims alongside that reputational impact that may be public, it may be something that maybe you have to deal, you're a law firm, you got E&O coverage or not, you may be dealing with a lawyer in your firm that you have to fight a bar grievance on their behalf or something of that nature for a client. If you have a cyber breach, it may be something that's pasted all over the internet about how your company doesn't take cybersecurity seriously and things of that nature. So, a lot of times people don't actually take proper assessment of what about the reputational impact that we might have as well, because it's not all about the dollar. A business needs a strong reputation as well as cash flow. And then finally, for strategic, I would say this is going to be directors and officers and key person insurance is kind of once your business starts scaling up and you're really looking at growth and exit strategy, these types of things start to become a little bit more important. And then product liability is not necessary if you don't sell products, of course. And so from a strategic standpoint, it may just not even be relevant. So what are some ways that you see these business issues end in loss? We've talked about this, of course, throughout the presentation. But is there anything here you would like to bring up that maybe was triggered by some of the risk categories that we looked at?
Well, I mean, I think, when you're talking about everyday business issues, I mean, I think the four that I kind of identified that are going to be your most prevalent issues are going to be employee injury. I mean, that is every day that you're open and have employees, that's a risk on the table that is a very low threshold. Motor vehicle accident, if you have people driving around on your behalf as a business, I mean, listen, we're in Atlanta, right? I mean, you can't drive anywhere and not see an accident. I mean,
Correct.
they're all over the place. And so there's a significant risk that your business or someone in your business is going to be impacted by a motor vehicle accident quite often, honestly. So those two, obviously injury from, if you have a workplace that invites customers onto the premises, again, that's almost part and parcel with the employee context, and that, it's just screaming for a claim to happen. I mean, and you as a business owner can take all the reasonable precautions to make sure there's nothing unsafe on your premises, but some things just happen. Like, I'll give you the instance, I walked into a store. I was going to buy something from the bakery, and I had to walk by the floral area, and I had sandals on, and I was walking, and I slipped on water that was used to, I guess, water the flowers right there. There was no sign. It probably just happened, but I was walking by and slipped down. Now, did I bring a claim? No, but that's a great example of, was Publix probably doing a decent job of making sure there wasn't any dangerous conditions on their floor? Probably so, but it still happened.
Correct.
And thankfully, I wasn't severely injured, but me as a personal injury attorney, I slipped and fell, right?
Right.
Right. And so, and then, the fourth one, your employees, obviously, having that potential exposure of having a disgruntled employee make a claim against you never goes away. I think those are the four kind of just constants that a business owner has got to be constantly trying to mitigate, those exposures.
Agree. Those are really the key ones that, of course, that we are also looking at as well. So let's take action, guys. So if you are trying to figure out, do you have the right insurance? First, you want to look at your risk. Okay. And so you can use that slide that we showed. We're going to send a risk assessment out as well. Some of the folks that signed up, I think a fair amount, most of the people that signed up didn't show up. So I'm wondering if they're doing the recording later, but we're going to send this assessment out to that list of folks anyway. That way that they can get it. If you watch this later and you want to get that assessment, reach out to our team. We'll be happy to send that over to you. And then when you are doing that, you want to look at the risk, impact, and the likelihood. Okay. And so when you're thinking about, well, what has happened in the past, what is likely to happen in the future, it's also impact. Impact is a big aspect of insurance risk mitigation. And then finally, you want to create the plan to mitigate it, and then you want to monitor that plan over time. So once you get the insurance in place, you cannot become complacent. Your insurance needs are going to change over time. You're going to need to increase the coverage over time. Your business is going to grow. It's going to have increased risk. You may add new lines of business. You may add new employees. It's just all kinds of things that are going to change over time. So if you're already doing those regular meetings, quarterly meetings, or annual planning meetings, make this part of those meetings. This is what we would consider part of a compliance program. Insurance is a big part of compliance and making sure that your business is staying as protected as it can to reduce the risk to its owners and its other stakeholders. So you'll get an email with a comprehensive risk assessment, like I said. So watch out for that. And then also, I just wanted to go ahead and give you Zach's contact info. If you're watching from a computer, you can scan the QR code here. We've got his contact information. We will also send this out for you as well. There are a lot of options in the marketplace for personal injury attorneys, just like there are for business lawyers. Zach's not going to be the right fit for everyone, but I will say this about Zach. He is a very diligent lawyer, and he is a fair lawyer. And you heard him earlier. He worked for the insurance company. So if you are injured, if one of your employees is injured, or even a member of your family or a friend, consider calling Zach. Zach is an injury lawyer that you can trust to shoot you straight about your situation. Sometimes your business is actually going to be the claimant, and you may have an injury that you need to report and get covered by another insurance plan. And so if you find yourself in that situation, or anybody you know, Zach is somebody who I highly recommend. And so we will send out his contact info as well. Zach, is there anything else you'd like to say for folks to consider as we close out today? We've got a few more minutes. Like I said, not a ton of people got on here live today, unfortunately, but we did get them in their sign up, so they'll probably watch this later. If you want to maybe try to anticipate what some of those questions might be, we can go ahead and try to get some of that in the last few minutes so that we can hopefully answer questions before they come up. And then if not, they can reach out to you, of course.
Sure. First, I want to thank you, Danielle, for the opportunity to be on this webinar with you. I would first want to say, if you own a business, having a business attorney, someone that is experienced in all the issues that small businesses face, is essential. Having that advisor, that go-to advisor that can answer these questions and be on your team, it's essential. And so you do a service for the community, Danielle, the business community, and I think I trust you with my referrals, and anyone that sees this, I certainly think if you own a business and you don't have Danielle on your team yet, I want to encourage you to get her on your team. It is essential for the long-term health of your business. As far as insurance is concerned, the one thing coming out of this that I hope business owners will kind of review or rethink what insurance is. It's not a cost of business. It's an investment in your business. You are investing in the health and well-being of your business. So stop looking at the dollar number and start looking at what you're buying. Okay? The biggest mistake people make is, I'm getting the lowest price. Okay? Well, guess what? You're going to get what you pay for. Okay? Not only, and every carrier is different too, right? Some carriers go to great lengths to keep their clients out of litigation, and others don't give a rip. They will throw you under the bus and put you into litigation like that. They don't care. Okay? So when you're buying insurance, you are buying peace. You are investing in your peace of mind. Okay? So if you want the cheaper option, you're likely going to see a consequence down the road that you're not going to want to be a part of. So I want to encourage you, when buying insurance, first talk to Danielle, your business attorney, then she can likely refer you. And if you want a second opinion, I'll be happy. You can get on the phone with me, no cost. I'll be happy to give you a referral for someone an agent. Don't buy it online, buy it from an agent, a reputable agent that will walk you through what you need and what carriers are available to you. And that's maybe where I could come in as a value add, is I could tell you which ones really go to bat for their customers and which ones don't. And you don't think about that when you're buying insurance, but the reality is that's what you're paying for, is that they protect you. And it's not just the money, but it's also your time. You're mixed up in litigation for years. You're spending all that time away from your business.
Correct.
And so not every insurance carrier is the same. And so that's where maybe I can provide value is, Zach, what carriers do you believe are good? Which ones do you believe I need to stay away from?
Thanks for that offer. That's a great offer. I would definitely take Zach up on that. Because the reality is that, just like Zach said, they're not all created equally. And one thing I will add to what you mentioned is, we see it often where there is insurance coverage, there is coverage counsel. The lawyer is ethically required to advocate for the business, but the lawyer is being paid by the insurance company. And so the lawyer also has duties to that insurance company as well. And that's not to say that the lawyer is being unethical. This is a system that we've created, and it's a public policy issue that we've accepted as true and necessary. But the point there is that you may still need an advocate on your side through that process. And we can help with that. We do that often as well, just as a checks and balance, So when you are getting information from the claims coverage counsel, that you're getting the right information, and that's going to protect your business as best as possible. Because what some of the claims or I guess some of the situations maybe open themselves up to are bad faith failure to settle claims and things of that nature, where maybe an insurance company should have settled a claim and did not, forced exposure to the policyholder. And some of those issues can also be protected by competent business counsel as well. So it doesn't have to be us, of course. We welcome anyone that wants to come be our client, but just any business attorney that is knowledgeable about insurance and insurance defense and how this works can help you through the claims process as well, to make sure that you are getting, what you've paid for with those policy premiums.
I will say this: if you as a business owner do end up in a potentially large or catastrophic loss that someone in your organization caused, I will say that it is very wise to have not only, the insurance provided attorney is great, but having your own personal counsel is essential. And that's where Danielle could step in and be that advocate that's strictly looking out for your interest. And that does happen. I handle cases a lot where there's very serious injuries, and the businesses or other people who have the means to do it hire their own personal attorney to be involved in the process.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I'd like to just close and say something I think that's important for us to say, because, we are of course also business owners as well. And so when we're talking about all of these things, they do cost money, guys. We know they cost money. And we understand that it's not easy. It's not cheap to be a business owner. What you need is people on your side that are able to help you discern. And Zach has made a valuable offer to you today. I encourage you to consider reaching out to him if you have any further questions, or honestly, just to get to know him. If you'd like to know Zach so that you have an injury attorney you can refer to others, please reach out to him. He's a great networker. He's probably the best networker I know. Well, I got another guy in mind too, but Zach does a really great job at networking, and he's very active in the community. So he's right up here in the Gwinnett, North Atlanta area, and you can find him around often in some of the kind of networking spots. So he's a great person to know. He has some brokers that he can recommend. Of course, we also have some brokers that we can recommend as well. So when you take that risk assessment, if you do need to talk to someone, feel free to reach out to Zach. Feel free to reach out to us. Either one of us will be happy to get you to a broker so you can start to look at what you have going on. And if you need any additional support, of course, I'm sure that we would be happy to help you with that. If you're a client watching this, if you haven't gotten our annual risk assessment, you haven't had us look over this stuff for you, please do so. It's important, and I know it can also often get shoved under the rug. So we don't want to see you end up without coverage. For you, Zach, thank you again. This has been very informative, very helpful, and I appreciate the way that you are a very straight shooter. I think it's one of the values that we share. And so it's been really nice to have a very candid conversation with you today. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. I really appreciate the invite. I had a great time discussing these issues with you, Danielle, and I hope your audience will derive some value out of what we've been talking about today, and use it to their benefit for their business.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Zach. Bye, everybody. We'll see you back soon.
Thank you.